Welcome everyone back to weekly weather updates, and in today's video we're going to have the latest from the live radar, run for the UKV, have the precipitation and the temperature over the next 5 days, as we still have this gloomy mild pattern as we see high pressure sticking around through the next 5 days or so. It's likely to last into the early part of next week before we could see things completely reversing as we head towards the middle of the month. Now, as we have been alluding to, especially over the past few videos, but has been hinted at in the past week, there has been an increasing signal for higher pressure to move further northwards and westwards and open the doors to potentially something colder into the second half of the month. Now, in yesterday's video, it's the first video where we've seen a proper cold snap from the GFS. And once again today, we've got a very cold GFS run, even colder than yesterday, delivering widespread cold, not just for northern areas, but all the way towards the south coast of England into that cold, snow-conducive air mass. And of course, we need support, and we are seeing support today from both the GEM and the ECMWF, and even the ensembles have shifted quite significantly towards something below average as well. So quite a big shift since our video yesterday to potentially a cold or even very cold second half of the month. So do remember, if you enjoy the videos, make sure you like and subscribe, and remember to follow me on Twitter as well, the link's in the description. Now, if you do start on the live radar, you can see it is dry, but actually it is not completely dry. I'm in and around London, and I can say for certain that we've had quite a lot of on and off drizzle throughout today. So even though the live radar isn't showing much, there has been patches of thick cloud, drizzle, and quite dense fog in places. So although it doesn't look too bad on the live radar here, has actually been, especially in local areas, in valleys, it has been really quite miserable in places. Again, it's not pouring rain, we're not seeing flooding, no weather warnings, but I'm getting a bit tiresome of these conditions. I'm pretty sure most people are as well. Now, the big positive is it is fairly mild, especially in the far southeast this evening, where it is foggy, colder, with that drizzle around. It is a little bit chillier, but most are still average to above average. Lots of yellows, and you see the cold conditions are further eastwards. We're starting to see potentially the first sort of big snowfall for Eastern Europe that we've seen through the autumn, and that is occurring out to our east. If we actually do put on the past 24-hour snowfall, a lot of snow has fallen in the past few days, but you can see where that snow has come through down towards southern and eastern Europe now, but we did see some slightly further westwards as well. So first snows really descending from the north, and this is because this is the eastern side of the high. What we're thinking is going to happen potentially in a week or so is that high shifts westwards and northwards, and we could be in these plunging northerly winds. Now, if you go over to the UKV first of all to see the next 5 days, again, a bit of a spoiler, it is bang average, exactly the same as we've seen for the past few days, the past week or so in general. Mild bits and bobs of drizzle and thick cloud. There could be a bit of more persistent rain potentially later this week into the weekend, drifting in from the west. But with the high pressure, it means that these lingering weather fronts, these decaying weather fronts, don't really make much progress, and nothing really too much happen. Just perhaps a little bit more persistent drizzle and maybe some more lighter rain. There could be some clearing, perhaps Sunday into Monday, as we do see air masses change. It could shift that gloomy conditions away, which again would be a positive, but it is only potentially coming in 3 or 4 days' time, so not any time in the imminent future. But this is opening the door for that high pressure shifting westwards and northwards, and that does unlock the possibility of much colder conditions. But if we look at the temperatures, you can see generally hovering around average into Thursday, around the sort of 10 to 14 degree mark. As we head into Friday, similar conditions, slightly chillier, maybe 7 to 9 degrees, so starting to drift a little bit cold, even though there is mild upper air temperatures, a bit chilly towards the surface with all that cloud and drizzle. Into Saturday, similar conditions, a bit chillier further northwards, but milder further westwards and southwards. And the same can be said for Sunday. Again, maybe low to mid-teens, maybe just getting up towards 15, 16 degrees, and then slightly chillier again on Monday. So temperatures are up and down, but not deviating too far from average, maybe a degree or two. Really nothing to shout home about. Again, the biggest thing is it's just going to continue to be gloomy. But being completely honest, I don't think I've actually seen the sun in about a week now. Really is quite horrible. But hopefully, as we saw from the precipitation charts a second ago, it's going to change potentially Sunday into Monday with some drier slots moving through. But if we do now have a look at the main event, the longer term charts, which I know most people will be very intrigued with. This is the midday run, the 6 p.m. run is coming out as I'm recording this, but it's not fully come out yet. It's only out to sort of day 6 or so there's no real point looking at that for that longer term prospects. You can see though, over the coming days, high pressure continue to dominate. We can already see it's starting to shift further northwards, and in about a week's time, this is where we start to see changes. The wind veers more of a northeasterly, so already a colder air mass will be starting to drift in, and you can see the tropospheric polar vortex starting to shift towards Scandinavia and towards Russia. Now this again is preliminary signs that high pressure is going to replace it towards northern Canada and Greenland, and this is what we start to see. Initially, late next week, easterly winds starting to turn a bit chillier. You see colder air masses pushing in, the potential for frost, and just generally a much colder feel with that wind coming in from the east. But then look what happens. That high pressure really gets going to our west, and it unlocks the door to full-blown northerly winds to end this run. And so into the final week of November, a big mid-Atlantic block extending towards Greenland, and you see a full-blown northerly wind. The upper air temperatures widely down to -5, the -10 isotherm coming in. This is as cold as it can really get in towards the end of November. You can see the coldest air mass over the northern hemisphere is heading towards. You can see the big blob here of all the cold air towards the Arctic, and you can see we are tapping directly into it, turning us exceptionally cold for the time of year. If we actually just go back to the European view, put on the temperature deviation, you can see we're around 8 to 10 degrees below average. If we look at the 2 meter temperatures, this is at midday, we're just about around freezing or slightly above 1 or 2 degrees, and overnight we'd be widely below freezing. Of course, we've only got a few frames here of very cold conditions because it comes right at the end of the run. But if we do look at the snow depth, you can see snow starting to become widespread as we head into the end of the run. And if we do look at the precipitation type, you can see snow showers packing in from the north, and you can see from all these hashed symbols that is snow, and you can see all precipitation coming from this air mass coming in from the north is falling as snow. So this is not just a small little cold snap, this is a full-blown cold spell that would deliver widespread snow, widespread very cold conditions, frost, the full shebang. It would be a proper colder spell, not just hints, not just a chilly spell. This is a full-blown winter period, and it's coming potentially into the last week of November. Very interesting following on from the run we saw yesterday. And again, the reason why I do have some fairly moderate confidence in this is because we've been seeing and watching the hints over the past week or so. And I know probably a lot of people have been watching and saying, oh, you know, you're picking up on small little bits, it's never going to happen. But we've slowly watched that blocking evolve within the longer term outlooks. And finally, in the last day or two, we're now seeing these properly cold runs appearing. It's a really interesting transition we've watched in the past week. And that's why, even though sometimes we don't see massive changes day to day, it's always important to watch those small shifts and look at what we've seen over a number of days, as it can give us these indications, as I have been talking about, the risk of this since probably the weekend or even late last week. And finally, we're seeing these runs starting to appear within the longer term outlook. Now, it doesn't mean it's going to happen, but it just means that the models are now properly showing that risk towards the final third or so, or second half at least, of November. Interestingly, we actually have support from the GM and the ECMWF, or at least more support. Not full blown as cold as the GFS, because it only goes out to day 10, so it doesn't get into that final week of November, but it is very supportive out to day 10. High pressure dominating like the GFS, and then slowly we see that high pressure ridging further westwards, very similar with the tropospheric polar vortex transitioning eastwards. I think that's going to be the most pivotal thing to watch as we head into next week, because if that does occur, it really does open the door to colder potential. If it doesn't occur, then the blocking will have a real struggle to dominate towards Greenland, and that's where we could just see sort of mid-Atlantic ridges, transient northerly winds, where it's still cold, still the risk of wintry conditions, but it wouldn't be a full-blown cold spell. So that is something that we will really want to watch as we head into next week to see how that evolves. And finally, out towards day 10, you can see that high pressure transitioning up towards Greenland, lots of blocking towards northern Canada, or at least absence of lower pressure, and you can see the northerly wind is getting unlocked and very cold air is imminent. And you can see this upper air temperatures 10 to 12 degrees below average, just a few hundred miles to our north. Now, if we finish by looking at the latest ECMWF again to see how closely it correlates with the GM and the GFS. Again, out towards day 7, very similar. We start to see that shift from the tropospheric polar vortex, that cold air moving towards Greenland, out of Greenland, towards Scandinavia. And out towards day 10, we start to see the risk of something more northerly based, and you can see high pressure ridging northwards. But this is what I'm talking about. If we don't get rid of this low towards northern Canada and Greenland, we'd really struggle to see proper blocking. And instead what we see here is a cold pattern. It's below average. It's chilly. Frosts would be a risk, even some snow in northern areas, but it wouldn't be a full-blown cold spell. It wouldn't be anything too severe. And that's all because this pressure, high pressure, doesn't get northwards enough and doesn't drag all of this cold air into northern Europe. So again, ECMWF close, but does show you what can happen if that blocking doesn't get going and that transition eastwards of the low pressure over Greenland. So we'll have to keep a very close eye on it, but ECMWF fairly similar, but is a little bit more pessimistic. But nonetheless, all 3 runs showing that evolution into the end of next week. Now, to finish by looking at the ensembles, a lot more support now for something colder. You can see we're dipping below average in around 6 or 7 days' time, and we start seeing a much stronger signal for below average conditions. Those cold or very cold runs, like the GFS operation run, not got massive support, but got a lot more support than it had yesterday, which had more support than the day before. So it's increasing, but it's not overwhelming. Maybe a quarter of runs showing something very cold, which is, a significant number, but in the grand scheme of things, only 7-8 runs out of 30. So there are 22 other runs not showing it. So we have to look at it from that perspective. But you can see, though, the white line, the ensemble mean, is much more average to below average, and it does it a little bit earlier than we've been seeing recently. So you can see it slowly coming into the more sort of medium time frame. And again, you can see that it is a lot of runs going colder, unsettled as well. Dew points, another thing to keep a close eye on. Cold, not too many very cold. A very cold northerly would have the dew points well below freezing, and you can see that appearing here into the final 10 days or so. But you can see again turning chillier next week. So again, not expecting anything major next week. We are talking longer range. We are talking 10 to 20 days time. So again, nothing immediate. 10 to 20 days time. That is the time frame where this could occur, and that's what we're seeing from the models at the moment. So much can change, of course, though. We've seen this before, numerous winters. We see it most years, actually, where we see these sort of patterns evolving in that longer range, and then they start to disappear or get moderated. So again, I wouldn't say this is definitely going to happen, but very intriguing that we've already got the risk of something very cold, and it's only early November. Now, to finish by looking at the ECMWF ensembles, very similar, average to below average into the longer range now. Quite a few very cold runs appearing, maybe about 10 or so, 10 to 15, which is about, again, a quarter to a third of the ensemble suite, and a lot more precipitation. So even if it doesn't go very cold, it does look like it's going chillier, and it does look like it's going unsettled again. So more mobile in terms of seeing low pressure nearby instead of the dominant high. So again, we'll have to keep a very close eye on it as we head over the next week or so. All eyes are going to be on Greenland with that lower pressure shifting eastwards and high pressure slowly replacing it. If that occurs, then I do think the possibility of something cold is reasonably high, but that is something to keep an eye on as we head into next week, as that is when that could occur. Then it's a few days up to a week after that is where we could see those knock-on effects in cold air fully arriving. So as I said, 10 to 20 days, that's the time frame we're looking. Nothing imminent, gloomy high pressure around at least for the next 5 days. Then it could be a little bit drier, or it's going to remain dry, but a little less gloomy with some clearer skies potentially next week. And then the slow transition to something colder could arrive initially with an easterly flow. We saw that from the GM and the ECWF, but eventually it could be that north or northeasterly that does bring a proper spell into the end of the month. But again, we're still good, a couple of weeks away, and we'll keep a close eye on it. So thanks for watching, hope you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, and I'll see you again for another video soon.